Hey everyone, welcome back to another driving review video here on the channel. Today you join me in the 2025 Mazda CX-30 Turbo Premium Plus, or basically a lifted Mazda 3 hatchback for the most part, although that's not necessarily 100% true. Now as usual, we're going to start with my acceleration test. We'll go ahead and do a full throttle. It's a little bit slick outside, got a little wheel spin. Oh man, this thing just pulls. So under the hood of this vehicle, you're gonna find the 2.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder paired to a 6-speed torque converted automatic transmission and standard all-wheel drive. This powertrain using premium fuel is good for 250 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque. And I have to say, just like that of my Mazda 3 hatchback turbo review, I love this engine and this powertrain. It is quite stout, especially for a vehicle of this size, weight, and classification. And I have to say, even though this is identical on paper to that of the Mazda 3 hatchback, for some reason, this 6-speed seems a little bit more crisp and a little bit more firm to shift. And it does only have about 1,422 miles as I'm filming this, but it has actually made the experience quite enjoyable in that it's not a sloppy torque converted automatic transmission, at least so far, but it's actually fairly responsive and somewhat refreshing compared to other manufacturers, their powertrains, and maybe the dual clutch transmissions, aka that I have in my personal vehicle. Now going back to the Mazda 3 versus CX-30 comparison, well, these two vehicles are very, very similar, and as I noted about a year ago to the month, a lot of buyers out there might end up cross-shopping the two vehicles, but ultimately might go with the CX-30 just due to its more SUV type of body shape, ride height, and ground clearance. And now, having had a week behind the wheel of this vehicle, I don't fault them necessarily for doing that, because there are a couple benefits to that. But there's also going to be one drawback, I will say, at least that I've been able to distinguish between the two vehicles, outside of some minor differences that you may or may not pick up on if you were to compare these two vehicles, say at your local dealership, in the exact same trim level, things like that. Anyways, starting out with my usual visibility, the CX-30 is pretty darn good, just like that of the 3 hatchback. Although just note, with a lot of Mazda products, there is going to be a slightly higher belt line you will find, sitting inside this vehicle. The seating position has a good amount of adjustment in its vertical orientation and can go quite low, but here just a little bit from its lowest seating position. You have good visibility at the front. The mirrors are door mounted, so you have glass between the mirror and the A-pillar, so you can see around them on both sides. Of course, blind spot detection. B-pillars in kind of a okay position. I can see through the rear glass. I'm looking over my shoulder to the left. Looking over to the right, pretty good as well, with a very small quarter window in the C-pillar there. And then out the back window, visibility once again pretty good. The headrests do protrude just a little bit above the seat into the glass space, and it's a fairly narrow glass in general, but overall, this has a traditional, I would say, compact hatchback vibe, and I don't have any problems. It's actually a preferred segment or size of vehicle that I really enjoy driving on a daily basis, and that 2.5 liter turbo underneath the hood makes this just that much more enjoyable, and is one of the standout things in the subcompact SUV class in terms of power output. You really don't find a lot of performance-oriented subcompact SUVs, so I think it's good on Mazda for offering this powertrain. And like I said, that 6-speed is really responsive. I don't know if there's been a tuning change or what, but like putting your foot down just in normal drive mode, oh man, it picks the right gear and goes, and it's crisp as shift. Man, that is very enjoyable. Another aspect of the 2.5 turbo is the sound you get from here inside the cabin is a deeper, throatier tone. It's not, a tinny 4-cylinder noise that you kind of typically expect. It's just a very nice sounding vehicle and impressive powertrain, to say the least. Now, touching on the ride quality and some of the differences that I recall from the Mazda 3 hatchback is, I think since this vehicle sits up just a little bit taller, has a higher center of gravity, and likely is tuned a little bit differently in its suspension, ride quality in this vehicle is pretty darn spot on, I have to say, for my preferences. So you have 18-inch alloy wheels, fairly sizable sidewall tire, and it is going to be a little bit of a firmer ride than that of maybe some of the vehicles that this competes with. But I have to say, that makes for a more enjoyable experience in my opinion, because it gives it a little bit better handling, a little bit of a quicker, more nimble feel behind the wheel, while still being extremely comfortable, especially here in the two front seats. Now out back, that might be a little bit of a different story, but we'll touch on that here in a minute. So ride quality, I think Mazda's done a very good job with the damper tuning, the stiffness of the spring rates. As a entire package, it's very nimble, very somewhat sporty, handling oriented, but it does have a slight bit more body roll just due to that higher center of gravity and the tuning differences versus the Mazda 3 hatchback. So I do like the way Mazda has done this vehicle, and if you're going to get a subcompact SUV, it's one of the more enjoyable experiences to drive. But I like the lower center of gravity and some of the, inherent characteristics that come with the compact hatchback space, such as the Mazda 3 hatchback. Now, here we are heading over my bumpy section of road to wrap up the ride and handling. These are some pretty sizable bumps, kind of moderate in nature. I mean, it's comfortable. I mean, it is pretty darn good the way that they've tuned the suspension. Oh, I mean, I just have no complaints with the ride quality, the handling, and I think the average person out there would find it just a touch firmer than that of maybe something they might be comparing it to or used to, but not harsh by any means. Now, along with the comfort aspect, the leather seats here in the front are going to be, again, a standout amenity. Of course, they're going to be power memory here on the driver's side, two-way power lumbar. Unfortunately, only a four-way manual passenger seat, so no height adjustment over there, which I think is somewhat of an omission at this price tag. But the seats themselves have a good shape, very similar in design, upholstery, comfort to that of the Mazda 3 hatchback and other Mazda vehicles. I wouldn't say they're necessarily on the narrow side, but they are somewhat snug on the bottom bolster, but perfect for my preferences. The only thing that I would like to see changed or modified at all is a slightly longer bottom cushion, or a power adjustable leg extension would suffice as well, just for a little bit of additional thigh and leg support. But outside of that, the lumbar's in the right spot. The backrest or the headrest doesn't give me any issues with my spinal fusion like some vehicles do, and it's one of the just more comfortable vehicles that I've been in. And another aspect that you'll find not only similar between the Mazda 3 hatchback or just across a lot of Mazda vehicles is the interior. So the interior with Mazda, especially over the last 5 to 7 years ago, depending on the vehicle generation, they've been trying to move up market into the luxury space. And along with that, the pricing kind of goes hand in hand with that. But I think they found a great middle ground so far right where they're at that bridges the mainstream segment and that of the luxury segment. So inside this vehicle, you're gonna find a ton of premium leather materials and just overall quality in design and the actual switchgear that they're using. So this one's the black and brown two-tone. So you have the brown accented leather with the accent stitch across the dashboard into the door panels. And then the seats are black leather. You have nicely padded armrests, a little bit of piano black hidden here and there across the interior, especially here in the center console, mixed with just enough bright silver chrome work to give it that extra luxurious flair that a buyer shopping for this vehicle at a slight premium price tag might expect. So Mazda's interiors are so refreshing to get in my opinion, coming from a couple other manufacturers especially, that I see the premium appeal not only in what they're trying to accomplish, but also maybe a little bit of justification for the price point that they are charging, especially in these premium plus fully loaded trim levels. So if you're familiar with the Mazda 3 interior or some of the other vehicles, you're going to find this quite at home. Of course, you have a leather-wrapped heated steering wheel. Unfortunately, the top portion of the wheel is not heated like some of those other vehicles. Dual-zone automatic climate control, heated front seats. Unfortunately, no ventilated seats, which again, I listed on my dislikes. I think is a little bit of a drawback there. Of course, your controller for the multimedia infotainment system is down here in the center console. Wireless Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, just like most of their vehicles at this point. And I think everything is very cohesive, easy to use, fairly simple in nature. I'm just a huge fan of their interiors coming from other manufacturers that I've spent, you know, quite a bit of time with. And yeah, I think the Bose premium audio system that this one has, 12 speaker in design with center point surround sound technology, sounds pretty darn good. You do have the dedicated subwoofer in the hatch area for the spare tire. And then overhead, you do have a smaller standard size power sunroof, which lets in a good amount of light, especially on these cloudy, dreary, you know, drizzly days that we're driving in currently. So interior, I think, is a standout amenity in this class of SUV, and I think matches the price tag that they're trying to charge for this vehicle, you know, quite well. One of the attributes I like of Mazda's technology, heads-up display interacts very well with the driver assistance technology, including the blind spot detection. It's actually a heads-up display that you can change the brightness with and crank up enough to see with polarized sunglasses fairly easily. So I've enjoyed that, using that heads-up display. Very easy, simple to use. You have the auto-dimming exterior side mirror, which is great for nighttime driving, along with the interior auto-dimming mirror. That's a feature you don't normally see in this segment once again. And I do like the analog digital gauge cluster, I should say the analog/digital gauge cluster, which can mimic that of a fully analog gauge cluster in the middle, or pressing the info button will give you some other configurable screens that you can modify very slightly, but again, fairly simple, not a ton of customization that you can do, but enough that I think the average person will find it sufficient. We'll go ahead and throw the vehicle back into sport mode. Immediately, the transmission downshift, I mean, that was crazy quick to react. I've enjoyed that quite a bit for a torque converted automatic, and immediately can feel some of the body roll, but it's controlled quite well. Putting your foot down into it, feel that torque start to pull you through. Oh, greasy. Oh, and then we are up to speed without an issue here. So discussing some of the driver assistance technologies, this has the same feature set as that Mazda 3 hatchback I tested last year. So simply turn it on, hit the set button, and it will go ahead and set at your current speed with the lane centering enabled. But you can simply turn that off by one push of the button here right next to the set button on the cruise control. And it's a fairly decent driver assistance system. It is a hands-on torque sensing steering wheel, so it's not a touch capacitive type wheel like some other manufacturers are going to. So you do have to keep a little bit of pressure on it to keep it happy and alerting you from you know, thinking your hands are off the wheel. But the radar adaptive cruise control works pretty darn good. The lane centering is pretty good as long as it's not fighting you with thinking your hands are off the wheel, which it does occasionally at times, but for the most part, especially on those windier days when you're correcting anyway, it is happy. And I don't really have any issues with the performance of the system. I will just say Mazda probably needs to introduce a either hands-off level 2 system here shortly, or just a slightly more robust system that they currently have. This one doesn't have any sort of lane change assist. It doesn't have any of those more advanced features. Now, one of the items it doesn't have, which I'm kind of thankful it doesn't have, is there's no sort of eye tracking in this vehicle. So basically, it's not forced to keep your eyes ahead on the road at all times, which you should be doing anyway. But, you know, if for any reason you need to look away for a few seconds, look out the window, it's not going to immediately start yelling at you on the dashboard. Again, like other manufacturers have started introducing, and sometimes I think work okay, sometimes they're a little bit of a pain in the butt. Now, as you might have heard in the background of me talking, road noise on the interstate at, you know, 70, 75 miles an hour is actually really good. I think they've done a good job, for the most part, keeping this cabin as quiet as possible. You do hear a little bit of tire and a little bit of road noise depending on the surfaces that you're driving on, but I think wind noise in particular, especially when you have the audio system on at all, is drowned out fairly easily, and I would not hesitate at all to take this on a several-hour road trip at those speeds and not feel any sort of fatigue or, you know, get tired of the ambient noises coming into the cabin. Now, speaking of road trips and touching on fuel economy, well, I think this is where the drawbacks, you know, definitely start to come in, even compared to the Mazda 3 hatchback. So this vehicle, like I said, shares the powertrain with that vehicle. It has the same fuel tank size, which is 12.7 gallons according to Mazda. And unfortunately, it gets 1 mile per gallon less on the EPA rating than that of the Mazda 3 Turbo hatchback. Real world conditions, I'm not exactly sure. Haven't been the best test during my last week with this vehicle, unfortunately. But looking at the EPA figures, this vehicle is only estimated to get 318 miles on a full tank of fuel. And on my city type of driving, I think you'd be darn hard to, crack 225 miles on a full tank, getting these less than stellar fuel economy figures that I've actually realized. Now, that's a lot of idle time filming, creating the content as usual, and a lot of in-town short driving. So engine's got to get up to operating temperature, is less efficient that way. But nonetheless, I think the drawback of both of the Mazda 3 hatch and this vehicle is the fuel tank capacity, and combined with those fuel economy ratings of only getting 300 miles real world on a single tank. I wouldn't want to be stopping at the gas station all the time, maybe once a week at minimum, depending on how much you're driving on a daily basis. But if they put like a 14 or 15 gallon fuel tank, even with the average fuel economy ratings of this powertrain, I think the experience would be just that much more enjoyable. So do keep all of that in mind if you're looking at the Mazda 3 hatch or the CX-30. Is you're going to be filling this vehicle up quite a bit, especially if you're primarily driving it around town. But outside of that, I think there's some inherent design flaws or aspects I don't love about the interior and the exterior, for the fact. At the front of the vehicle, you do have, of course, the adaptive LED projector headlights that are steering responsive and leveling, but due to the front fascia design, I found that kind of those plastic trim inserts for the front bumper that sit directly below the headlamps attract and accumulate a lot of dirt, especially with the muddy rain that we've gotten here in the Midwest over this past about 10 days to 2 weeks. If you live at all in the central United States or Midwest, with the rain and the storms we've gotten, you've known that the Texas dust has just created a mess up here. And I noticed those areas of the front bumper get particularly dirty after any sort of rain, or especially the muddy rain we had. Kind of makes it look like they have baggy eyes. So I don't know, that's just a kind of a nitpick I've had in terms of aesthetics on the outside. But functionally, front rear parking sensors with braking assist. And I think the overall design language matches that of a lot of Mazda products, which I am certainly a fan of. This design language has been around for several years now, so we are maybe getting a little bit long in the tooth at this point with their designs, but I think it's still a very attractive design. I like seeing them out on the roadway. I like the LED turn signals that have a fade on-off function, which means they kind of draw your attention to the vehicle. They're amber in color, which I think are safety reasons. Do a better job than that of red LED turn signals or just standard on-off turn signals. So I like how Mazda kind of came up with that signature fading turn signal element, several years ago. And I think finally taking a look and comparing the Mazda 3 hatch to that of the CX-30 in terms of a value and a price point, they have the exact same MSRPs prior to destination in the Turbo Premium Plus trim level. Along with that, they have a lot of the same interior and feature set between the two vehicles. But the big difference with the CX-30 is you're paying $235 more in destination fees. So ultimately, identical vehicles side by side on dealership lots, this one will be a couple $100 more expensive over that of the Mazda 3 hatchback. And the only item that I can really note that you're gaining on the CX-30 is the power liftgate, which by itself is easily worth $235. Now, in terms of volume, cargo volume, if you fold the seats down between the two vehicles, again, you're getting a couple extra cubic feet more in the Mazda 3 hatch than the CX-30, which might not be a big deal to most people out there, but if you're using it for cargo hauling, it might make a difference, a couple inches in overall length and space. And the rear seat doesn't have any sort of USB charging or anything in this vehicle, so you basically just get rear AC vents, which is good for what it is, but it would be nice to have some USB charging ports back there in this one. But I think ultimately that brings me to my final conclusion that I see why people like the CX-30 over that of the Mazda 3 hatch for basically identical price points, especially if you're never using the back seats at all. I would be totally fine with this over the Mazda 3 hatchback, although I would value the handling characteristics, the compact hatchback appearance and look aesthetically, and just that segment a little bit more than, I guess, the subcompact SUV space, which the CX-30 currently competes in. Outside of that, I've enjoyed my week with this vehicle. You can see we're hitting some rain here, enjoying the automatic rain sense wiper functionality, which is, you know, just one of those premium features you don't normally see in these vehicles. So I think that is basically where I'm gonna leave this driving review video here on the 2025 Mazda CX-30 Premium Plus Turbo. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. I want to give a huge thanks to Mazda for sending this vehicle out for me to test and review. Every time I get in a Mazda, I genuinely enjoy it quite a bit, and it's just refreshing, to say the least, versus a few other manufacturers. Interiors, driving dynamics, suspension tuning, handling, everything like that. It's a vehicle that I would love to own and, you know, thoroughly enjoy, especially with that 2.5 liter powertrain. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. Hit that like button if you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure to stay tuned. Check out my dedicated likes and dislikes for specific items on this vehicle that I both love and maybe don't like so much, some of which are shared with the Mazda 3 hatch, some of which are specific to the CX-30. And with all that being said, I appreciate continued support on the channel and hope to see you guys in the next one.